The brutal rise of Mad Frankie Fraser is a true story of the Richardson Gang's most feared enforcer, a gangster whose reputation was well known across South London. Being a member of the Richardson Gang, he was automatically a rival of the infamous Kray Twins. Mad Frankie was known for his savage ways and unpredictable nature. As an enforcer, he played a key role in criminal operations to keep the people who chose to oppose the Richardson brothers in line. Mad Frankie would eventually face trial for the murder of a Kray associate and a string of gruesome tortures carried out against his rivals that the Richardson Gang believed to have turned against them. Fraser spent around 42 years behind bars and cemented a legacy in blood and fear. Early life of Frankie Fraser. Born Francis Davidson Fraser on the 12th of December 1923. He was the youngest of 5 children. Their dad was a mixed-race American Indian seaman, while their mother was an Irish-Norwegian woman who was a hard-working washerwoman. The Fraser family lived on Cornwall Road in Waterloo, London. Because of economic difficulties at the time, the family experienced poverty, but never resorted to crime, maybe because of their faith as devoted Roman Catholics. When Frankie was just 5 years old, the family moved to a flat on Woolworth Road, Elephant and Castle. Frankie, regardless of his family upbringing, turned to crime from a young age, with his sister Ava as his main accomplice, as they were close. Frankie joined the British Army in 1939 after the Second World War broke out. He soon left the army without permission by escaping from his barracks on more than one occasion, to the point where he just left. This was right around the time that he became involved in more serious crimes. Frankie was able to make money on the black market, selling supplies he had stolen from air raid shelters. This was easily achievable because of the constant blackouts at the time, coupled with the understaffed police force, because most of them had joined the British Army. His first prison sentence came in 1941, after he was sentenced for 15 months to HM Prison Wandsworth after he was caught breaking into a hosiery store in Waterloo. The war was very lucrative to men like Fraser due to the nature of his criminal activities, to the point where he joked in an interview that he never forgave the Germans for surrendering.
I'll never forgive Hitler for surrendering. Well, it was such a wonderful time in the war. Well, everything was rationed and you could get whatever you wanted and sell it on all over the country and everything. Of course, once the war was over, a lot of them things that were rationed wasn't then.
While serving a sentence at HM Prison in Chelmsford in 1942, recruiting officers for the British Army approached Fraser and served him papers to join the army. Although he was called up, he claimed to have ignored the call-up papers and never wore the uniforms. And any time he was apprehended, he escaped the barracks. Frankie Fraser. Post-war activities. Fraser was involved in more serious crimes. By the time the war came to an end in 1945, he was part of a smash and grab gang that raided a jeweler. He was caught again and sentenced to 2 years in prison. During this prison time at the Pentonville HM prison, he was certified insane by the prison doctors. Because of this diagnosis, he was sent to Cane Hill Hospital, which was a psychiatric facility located in Coulsdon, South London. The facility, also referred to as the asylum, was known for treating the mentally ill, including those who were diagnosed as criminally insane. The asylum also housed patients with conditions like schizophrenia, severe depression, and personality disorders. After he was released from Cane Hill Hospital in 1949, Fraser became involved with well-known West End gangster Billy Hill, who ran protection rackets with Jack Spot during the 1950s. Fraser got a job as a bodyguard for Hill, but that also included taking part in bank robberies. It's the London world, so that's also part of the role as a bodyguard. His participation in these robberies also led him to serve another prison sentence in the Durham HM prison. Again, he was certified insane and sent to Broadmoor Hospital, which was a high-security psychiatric hospital in Crowthorne, Berkshire. Fearing that he would be heavily medicated, Fraser stayed out of trouble while at the facility and got released in 1955. He did not waste any time and went back to work for Billy Hill. He was sent right into a gang war between Billy Hill and his former associate, Jack Spot. During the ongoing gang war, Jack Spot retired out of fear for his family after he was attacked 100 yards from his flat in Paddington. 8 men, including Fraser and Bobby Warren, attacked Jack Spot and his wife with clubs and knives. After his retirement, Hill took over all of Jack Spot's territory in West End. Frankie Fraser and Bobby Warren got arrested and sentenced to 7 years for the attack on Jack Spot and his wife Rita. During this sentence, the London criminal underworld changed dramatically, with the East End being under control of the firm, a gang operated by the Kray Twins, while the South End was under the control of the Richardson Gang. Frankie Fraser and the Richardson Gang. Fraser first met Charlie and Eddie Richardson during the early 1960s. They were two scrap metal dealers who operated in Camberwell, South London. The brothers were not just in the scrap metal business, they had a criminal enterprise that included drugs and the illegal underground adult entertainment trade. It has been stated that Fraser was invited to take part in the Great Train robbery because of his ties to the Richardson brothers, who were allegedly associates of Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind of the robbery, in which over £2 million was stolen. The only reason he declined to take part is because he was on run from the police. Despite him declining the offer, he narrowly avoided arrest as a suspect in the robbery. Because the Richardson brothers bribed a policeman, this move cemented their friendship and association. This when he became one of their primary enforcers with the role of dealing with turncoats, and his way of dealing with them was taking out their teeth with pliers. With Fraser's help, the Richardsons set up the Atlantic Fruit Machine enterprise, which acted as a front for the criminal activities of the gang. Other members of the gang included George Cornell, Jimmy Moody, and Albert Longman. Cornell was, like Fraser, one of the more unpredictable gangsters who would almost cause a war with other East End villains. The Richardson Gang had some dealings with the Kray Twins, having first met when Charlie Richardson and George Cornell were in Shepton Mallet prison. The understanding and respect for one another's criminal activities was tested by the mid-1960s, when a series of feuds between the two gangs erupted into violence. George Cornell had previously worked for the Krays, but had switched sides by 1964, when he started working for the Richardson brothers. He soon developed a hatred for Ronnie Kray, and the two were involved in several altercations. One occurred at the Brown Bear Public House, where, according to jewel thief and safe breaker Lenny Hamilton, Cornell knocked Ronnie Kray unconscious. One of the most commonly recounted stories regarding their feud was that Cornell had called the homosexual Ronnie a fat poof. However, this was later denied by Ronnie Kray, who said in a 1989 interview at Broadmoor that Cornell had simply threatened to kill him. This feud between Ronnie and Cornell would soon come to a violent conclusion: Frankie Fraser and the war with the Kray Twins. On March 7, 1966, members of the Richardson Gang, including Frankie Fraser, Eddie Richardson, and Jimmy Moody, were drinking at Mr. Smith's nightclub in Rushy Green, Catford, southeast London. Also present that evening were Billy Hayward, Henry Botten, and Peter Hennessy, who were members of another South London gang led by Hayward. An associate of the Kray firm was also there, Richard Dickie Hart, who, despite not being a member of Krays, was a good friend of the twins. The two gangs sat at different tables, and the atmosphere was at first convivial. However, when more Richardson gang members arrived, Hayward soon began to suspect that something might happen as retribution for having an affair with the wife of Roy Porritt, Frank and Eddie's mechanic. Hayward sent one of his members out to retrieve some weapons. By 3:30 a.m., Eddie Richardson asked Hayward and his gang to drink up and leave, as the club was only licensed until 3 a.m. One of the Hayward gang, Peter Hennessy, took offense and called Eddie a half-baked fucking ponce and shouted that he could take you any fucking time you like. Eddie Richardson and Hennessy began exchanging blows, and soon other fistfights had started. To the disbelief of everyone, Dickie Hart took out a gun and started shooting up the place, shouting, "Somebody's going to die." Hart then shot Harry Rawlings, and the Richardson gang member was bleeding profusely from a shoulder wound. Jimmy Moody and Ronnie Jeffries were trying to get him out of the club, while Frankie Fraser was trying to calm down Dickie Hart. Fraser was then confronted by Hayward gang member Billy Gardner, who asked him, "You tooled up, Frank," before shooting Fraser through the thigh with a .38 pistol. Despite his wound, Fraser knocked the gun from Dickie Hart's hand and proceeded to beat him. It was believed Fraser became known by his Mad Frankie sobriquet from this incident, after Hayward associate Henry Botten saw him kicking Hart in the head and shouted, "You're fucking mad, Frank. You're fucking bonkers." At some point, someone shot Dickie Hart dead as he was on or near the bottom of the stairs making his getaway. An unnamed gangster who was in the club at the time said that the shooting at Mr. Smith's was like Dodge City. The incident ended with both Eddie Richardson and Frankie Fraser shot, and in Lewisham Hospital. Questioned by police, the two denied all knowledge, stating, "Shooting? What shooting?" Members of the Hayward gang sought help after the shooting from Freddie Foreman. The fallout from the shooting of Dickie Hart was swift. 2 days after his death, Richardson gang member George Cornell was sitting in the Blind Beggar pub, drinking with friends when Ronnie Kray arrived with two associates. Cornell was heard to say, "Well, look what the dogs brought in," before Kray shot him through the head, killing him. This was the first murder committed by Ronnie Kray, Frankie Fraser, and the torture trial. trial. With Cornell dead and several of the most prominent Richardson Gang members either in hospital or arrested, associates of the gang who had fallen foul of their methods of retribution came forward to testify against the gang. One victim had previously come forward in July 1965 who claimed he had been found guilty of disloyalty and severely beaten and made to mop up his blood with his own underpants. One member of the gang, Johnny Bradbury, turned Queen's evidence and offered to inform on the gang in exchange for a pardon and immunity. Bradbury went to testify how members of the Richardson Gang used a variety of torture methods against anyone they considered a traitor, including pulling teeth out using pliers, using bolt cutters to cut off toes, and nailing victims to floors using 6-inch nails. The so-called torture trial began at the Old Bailey at the beginning of April 1967, and the court heard how the gang had made use of an electric generator to torture victims. It was a hand-cranked generator that was originally used for sending out SOS signals from aircraft that Charlie had taken from a scrapped World War II bomber they'd cut up at his Camberwell yard in New Church Road. A Richardson associate, Roy Hall, operated the generator and would years later describe how those he tortured, "They can't take it anymore. No one can. They turn into little kids and ask for mummy. It's something you have to see to know, but they can't lie to you. Even months later, if you go into a pub, because you have to talk to them, they go back into it. They're broken, and it never mends." The gang members were found guilty and sentenced to prison terms. Eddie Richardson had another 15 years added to his current sentence for affray, while his brother Charlie received 25 years. Frankie Fraser, who was present and participated in the torture, got 10 years, as did Roy Hall. Frankie Fraser, later life. During his time in prison, Fraser was involved in numerous instances of violence and disobedience against prison officials and other inmates. He frequently participated in riots and fought against guards and fellow inmates. During the Parkhurst prison riot in 1969, Fraser was one of the ringleaders and spent the following 6 weeks in the prison hospital because of his injuries. A constant troublemaker in prison, his sentences were almost always extended for attacking governors and warders over perceived injustices, which inevitably resulted in floggings, bread and water, and the loss of remission. When serving a sentence at Strangeways Prison, Manchester in 1980, Fraser was excused boots and allowed to wear slippers, as he claimed to have problems with his feet after another prisoner had poured a bucket of boiling water on them after Fraser had hit him. Released in 1985, he became something of a celebrity, appearing on many television shows and interviewed about his time and criminal activities with the Richardson Gang. He started giving gangland tours around London, taking people around various criminal locations, such as the Blind Beggar, where George Cornell was shot by Ronnie Kray. In July 1991, the then 68-year-old Frankie Fraser was shot in the head at close range in an apparent murder attempt outside the Turnmills Club in Clerkenwell, London. The hit was alleged to have been ordered by the Adams family, a powerful Clerkenwell crime family. Fraser later stated this was not true and that he had been targeted by rogue police officers. The attack left him with permanent injuries after part of his mouth was shot away in the incident. In typical style, Fraser refused to talk with police about the attack, stating that if you play by the sword, you've got to expect the sword as well. After his release, Fraser turned to writing his memoirs in 1994, titled Mad Frank. His wife, by whom he had 4 sons, died in 1999. 3 of his sons had followed in his footsteps into a life of crime, while the other son refused. Fraser referred to his 4th son jokingly as having let me down. In the last years of his life, Frankie Fraser was a resident at a sheltered accommodation home in Peckham. According to Eddie Richardson, Fraser suffered from Alzheimer's disease for the last 3 years of his life. He hit the headlines again in June 2013, when the 89-year-old Fraser was served with an antisocial behavior order, ASBO, by police after a row with another resident. Throughout his life, Frankie Fraser had spent between 40 to 42 years behind bars, and even in his dotage, he was still on the wrong side of the law. On November 21, 2014, he fell critically ill during leg surgery at King's College Hospital, Denmark Hill, and was placed into an induced coma. On November 26th, Fraser died at the age of 90 after his family made the decision to turn off his life support machine. His ashes were scattered near the grave of Charlie Richardson at Camberwell New Cemetery.